All right. Welcome to Bikas Web channel. My name is Bikas and I'm here with another exciting video, something that you have been requesting for a while. So a full stack series here. And as you can see in my Figma screen here, it's called Easy Link. So we are going to build a small application, web application. So this can be your portfolio project, and this is also a good opportunity for you to understand whole from front end, back end database and everything. So a typical MERN full stack project. We will be building a very simple yet very useful application, and that will be URL shortening. You know, there is bit.ly or Google where you provide a long URL, and then it will give you a short code, and then you can use that and it will redirect you to the original URL. So that's what we will be doing. If that sounds exciting, if that's what you are looking for, then smash the like button. If you are new to this channel, feel free to subscribe channel. With that being said, let's start the video. All right, so the first part of the video, we will be dealing with backend part. And when I say backend, we will be dealing with Node as well as Mongodb, so that you can send a request with original URL and you will get back short URL. And then if you enter that short URL, you will be redirected to the original URL. Okay, so that's what we will be dealing with. So before we proceed, let's have a quick look with Figma here. So the final product or the final project will be with all this logging screen and so on, with all the dashboard and the way to make or edit all these links, as well as also there is a dashboard view and the desktop view, and there is a mobile view. However, first let's start for the backend or server part. So first let's go through the high level flow. So how does exactly it work, especially in the server side. So we'll send original URL. Okay, there will be more description, but main idea is there will be original URL will enter or user will enter, and we'll check if that exists. If it exists, then we will return a short URL for it, and then our program will end, or the flow will end. If not, we will generate URL code, so that will be those short code, and then we will store it in DB. And if the storing in DB, in our case MongoDB, is successful, then we will return this 201 that is created and then end. Okay, so we will also return some response there, as well as if in case there are any errors, then we will also show user maybe the possible error, and then we will end. So that's how you enter URL generation. And then there is also for short URL redirection. So this is a case where you already have generated short URL and you are entering that how to redirect it to original link. So for that, we'll enter. So someone will send a request to certain URL with the short URL, and then we will search in DB and see if URL code exists. If it exists, we will also increase our counter. So if you see in our design here, we even have a visit count. So that's what we will be dealing with. So we'll do that, and then we'll redirect to original link. Okay, but if it does not exist, then we will show 404, it's not found, and then we will end. So that's the flow. To start, I have this in my Bikas Web GitHub. There is Easy Link application. It's a public repo, so you can just clone this. And remember, I have a couple of branches, so this will be a fresh start. So if you want to follow along with me, then use this fresh start, because this master and tutorial branch will be already full of codes by the time you will be seeing this, because I will be dealing with this tutorial branch. Okay, so this is just a typical setup, and then there are client, that is a create React application with TypeScript, and then server, that is Node and Express with TypeScript, and we will add rest of the thing as we go. Okay, so here we are inside our VS Code, and you can see the same folder structure, easy link application. There is a client, there is a server, and then client we will not deal with it in this video, but we will be dealing with server. Okay, so first thing first, if you see, we have to set up our MongoDB. Okay, and before that, let's jump into server. I'll just clear it, and then I think there should be something called and dev. Okay, so first we need to do an install, and before that we will install some dependencies. So the first one being, let's just do that, and that will be Mongo's, because that's what we are going to deal with, MongoDB. And then there is another something called generate password. So this is what we are going to use for creating short URL code. All right, so those are installed. So now let's just do an install, and it's already installed. Okay, so the next one is and dev, and we have our 5001 port started. So if we go to Postman and we do a get, and so we have localhost. Okay, so let's send request. Okay, so it says cannot get, maybe because we have nothing there. So let's go to our src. So yes, we have server running, but we don't have any route or any setup. So the next thing, let's go and let's create a couple of folders. Okay, so the first folder will be config, where we will have all our configuration related, such as database and so on. Next one will be models. So the models is where we'll have all our database schema and so on. So that model is what will be used to give the database shape we want. And then we will have another, and that will be routes, because to handle all our routes, in our case for now, for this video, we'll have URL route, but later we'll also have user route. Okay, so and then the next one will be services. So okay, sorry, should not have done it there, but inside here. Okay, let's go and let's have services. And then the services is basically just a practice. Usually I do it so that everything that is interacting with the database, with our models and everything, we will do in services. Okay, and then the last one for now will be types. We might create a controller, but let's see how we will deal with that later. Okay, so now we have config, models, routes, services, types. Types will be everything that we will be typing with. So because this is a TypeScript file, so we want everything type defined. Okay, so the first thing, let's go with a config. Okay, and before that, I'll tell you, in the server root folder, you can use this. Okay, so we have port 501, and then also I will write Mongo URL, and this is where you will be entering your MongoDB URL, which consists of the username or admin name or whatever, and then password, and then the server name. Okay, so in my case, I have this MongoDB and then the server // So here you will be using your database username. So and then here you will be using your password. So whatever password you will get some kind of this format, and then here you can use localhost and then the port number where your MongoDB is, or whatever URL you have for MongoDB. So that's all you need to do. You need to create a .env file, and that actually should be in the root folder. So I have it in wrong. I'll just move it. So it should be in the same where we have a .env example. Okay, so I moved this .env here outside. So the next is we'll go here and we'll go to config, and we'll just create a file called dvconfig, or we can just have dv, and this will be also TypeScript file. So let's go inside our config file, and then I'll just copy paste this. So what this does, okay, so let's go and see. So we have something, we have imported Mongo's from Mongo's, and this strict query false. I did it because there was some issue with the versioning and so on. And then the next one is we just have created this function called dbconnect, which is async function, and we have a try catch. So let's override. So what it says, Okay, so it says it does not exist in something, so let's just remove this for now. And this also does not exist. Okay, we may add it later. So we just have like, if it's connected, we'll say db connected. If not, it will show us any error message that will be caught. Okay, so now let's go to our application here, and then we can import db config from config file, and then db. Then this is a function, so we need to call that function. Actually, let's just have the proper name. So we want that db connect to run after our server runs. So somewhere here, okay, so db connect, and then we do that. And if everything is good, like you see here, it says database is connected. So that means we have successfully connected to MongoDB. In our case, this is in Mango Atlas. In your case, it can be in localhost and so on. Okay, so the first part is done. We have now server running and it is now connected to the database. So the next part is we'll create a route. Okay, so let's go to our route here, and inside the route folder, I will create one index.ts. So, okay, so the reason why I'm creating this index.ts is because I just want that all the routes we will have. So in our case, we will have URL and user route, but in your actual application, you may have a lot of multiple routes. So I want to import all of those in index and then use that index as a main route. You will understand what I meant by it. So for now, let's just go to import something from Express, and that something will be router. Okay, this will give us a routing option. Then we can have an instance of it, so router. And then what we can do is we can say router.use, and then whatever we want. In our case, we have URL. Okay, and then for now we can have something. Don't worry, later I will actually give the proper type definition and everything, but for now it's just for testing, so I'm not going to do anything. Let's just say 200, and then we'll use something called send. Okay, in that case I will do router.get. Okay, so we need to use this somewhere. So to use this, we can go to our main app.ts, and then we can import it. So let's go here, and under this I want to import from our routes. Okay, and then we want to use it somewhere. So for that we already have app, so let's go after db connection. So we can use initiate router, and we can even have some pattern. So let's just first now do app.use, and you can just do something like this here, and then give base router, and that is okay. So when we have this, we are getting some issue here, and it says base router. Okay, so there is some problem, and that is we have to export this router here, and now we have exported, so everything good. So if everything is good, then we should be able to send a GET request to URL. So let's go here, and then I just do URL. It says hello because. So our whole routing process is good. However, I have this one practice that I usually follow, and you don't have to, but the idea is I would like to give API here, And then if I have API, obviously this route will not be called. So, and the reason is, and then I will always like to give all the routes here will use so API. So that is example will be. The reason why I do this is sometimes we might want to have different kind of approach or different kind of API versioning and so on. So it's better to have this one extra option. Okay. But as I said, it's not necessary. So now we have to go here and then we have to add API here. And if I do something like this, you see you get hello because. Okay. So we have already created the first route. And then there is also one more thing I usually do, and that is I like to print all the route calling. For this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just do app.use, and then it will have, you can see something, and then request, and that will be request type, and then we will have response, and that will be the response type, and then there is something called next, and that is next function. And what it does, so first thing we need to import from here request and response. So you know, for all of our route call, when we are making request, we have request which we can get a lot of things inside this request. And then we have response, that is when we get a request we can respond something back. Okay, just like how we were responding hello because here with the status code. Okay, that is something. And then there is a next, and that is sometime we may not want to respond, but we may want to pass this to other route calls or other stops, and it's super useful in middleware, but we are going to use this also here. So I have this console log, I'm just giving it route call, I have a template history, and then we have requested method that tells us if it is a get method, post method, or other type of methods. And then we are also doing a request original URL, so it tells us what is the original call made. And then there is a next function. Okay, so once we save this, so now if we go here, if I make a call, you will see it says route call, and the type of the route was get, and then it was called /API/URL. Okay, so this is something just for a better debugging later. I just wanted to show you this one. Okay, so the next thing, we already have router here, so we want to actually go and do something in our model. And let's go here and let's call it URL model. Okay, and that will be TS. So now this is the time we actually do something with our modeling, with our mangoes. So first thing, let's go and let's have mangoes from mangoes. Okay, and then the next thing is we will create URL schema. Okay, it's just a name because this is URL model, so I call it URL schema. And we will use something from mangoes, and then it has a schema, and inside a curly bracket it takes all the characteristics of your data. So what I mean by characteristics are all these. So we have these items, so let's just go and paste it here. So I will go here and have ID. That is not needed because, as I said, Mongodb automatically does that. So the next one is we want URL code, and then you need to define the type. So the type will be string. Remember, for mangoes we need this capital string, unlike normal TypeScript where you can also type the smaller one. And we want this to be true because for each of the link we are saving, we want that it has a URL code. And we also want this to be unique because we don't want that for two different original URL we have the same URL code. Okay, so the next one is original link. So actually let's just duplicate this. Then here we can have original link. Okay, and then original link type will be string, required is true because that's what we are anyway dealing with, these URLs. And then we also want that to be unique, just because if you see here in our flow, if it already exists, we are returning it, so we are not letting a duplicate of same URL. Okay, some people might do it, some people might let it. It's our decision, and we decided not to. Okay, the next one is name, and then name is also type string, and we can say, do we want required? We don't want this to be required because it's okay if you want to have it. If not, actually in our UI we can even show, instead of original URL or name, we can even show original URL or whatever, but we don't want that. Name should be mandatory. Okay, so every time we create something, it will automatically be there. However, we will also have something called updated it, and for this specific need, we may not need it, at least in our UI. We don't have anything to do with, we just have added date, but we don't have updated date. But it's just a practice that I usually follow, that if in future we want to know that when was the last link updated or so on, or when was the last link SS, it's up to us, we can use those. But for now I'll just keep it there, and then let's delete these. Okay, so we have a pretty nice schema, and then all I need to do is I have to export default this, and then there is Mongos. Remember, we are modeling here, and then we can give the name of model to, and then we have URL schema. So this way we have our model, and whenever you are using it in a MongoDB, in the collection of URL, because that's what we will have here, it will have all these fields plus of course ID. Okay, so now we have the model. The next is we want to go and we want to have our post route for post request. Before that, let's go to our services folder, and then here we can have URL services. Okay, and the reason why I'm having this URL services is, you see, we have a base router URL, and then we will have a new router called URL router here, and that router will actually handle everything. And instead of this, we will actually use that URL router from there. So that's what we will be dealing with. And then inside that URL router, we will have a post route where we will be getting all these values you like from the request. And then after that, our route or our URL route will forward some steps which services will handle. Okay, so let's go here, and we want input from URL model because that's what we need. And then first, let's just create. So we want to create services, so we can just export const and create URL, or yeah, we can call it create URL, and we will have payload. And then for now I will give any, but soon we will define the types. And then we will have try and catch. Okay, and here we will have const URL is new, we have that model there, and then we will pass payload. Okay, and then we will do await. Actually, we can just do let here, then we can have URL is await URL. So first we have this URL, which is an instance that uses this model, and our payload needs to be also the thing that we are expecting, all the required thing, it needs to have it. And then we are just saving it and then also attaching it in the same variable so that we will get the ID and everything. And then we are returning URL. Okay. And if there is something, we'll just create an error and we'll throw it. Okay, so this is our create service. Later we also have a get service, but for now let's just have a create service. Okay, and this is not necessary, like you can import this URL directly to your route or anything, or even your controller and so on, and then you can directly use it. But it's just that if you have multiple things to do, if you want to create hashes and you know, there can be so many things you are doing here, in that case you can always have this function so that you don't have to repeat the same thing again and again. For example, even in this case we have all these try catch everything, so we don't want to repeat it. We just want to call this function and pass the payload. So before we move on to next, I would like to create a type, and usually I just want to create index. That's my way of doing it. Some people do it, some people don't. Same with routes. You can have index.ts, and then you can also have another type, and that is called URL types. So this is completely not necessary. You can directly import things from URL type, but it's just, as I said, my practice. So here I have to do export type, and I can say URL payload type, and then here let's go to our model here. So all the required things are URL code, original link name is, and visit count. Visit count is actually not. So okay, so what we can do is we can have URL code, and that is string. Then we can also have and then we have name, that is string, but that's not mandatory. So this is the payload that we are expecting here. And then here what I can do is export everything from URL type. So that way, anywhere we want, we can just import URL payload type. Okay, so you see it imported from types, and I can do something like this, so that the more thing you keep on adding, and then you will just export from index. All you need to do is just use this one import, and then you can have multiple import here instead of having import from URL type, import from some other thing. So that's just the practice. Then so we have these, and then we may want to check one thing here. So okay, so we will do some more thing here. So we have like payload. So if we don't have payload dot, okay, so URL payload type, probably we don't want URL payload type, we don't want like URL code there. So if we don't have original link, then we just want to throw error, and we can say missing and then this is something that actually already in the route label you can use some external validating, and you can validate everything such as email, and if it contains only string or does it contain some like query or something, so you can use those kind of validator. But in this case we are just going to use only this. And then here I can also do one more thing. Let's import this from generate password, and we just give this idea. So here what we can do is we can create a URL code, and that can use this one, and then you can pass how long you want. You can have a 6 or 8. So I will just do 8, do you want numbers? And that is true. We don't mind with numbers. And then do you want uppercase? We want, so something is here. Okay, so we have length and we can even have uppercase. So this is our URL code. And then what we do is URL code is, will pass that URL code. So this way, for every request, we are creating a URL code and we are saving that. So I think this should do. So with that, now you see why we needed this function, because we don't want to do all this thing in route. So let's go to our routes here, and then inside the route, we'll create something called URL router, and then I'll import a couple of things. So one is this from Express, just like earlier, and then we will have also, we will import model, just like this. Okay, and then we will also import our services. So okay, and that will be create URL. Okay, so that is done. Same thing we do. So we have express.router, or we can actually directly even create router from here. So let's just do like that. In that case, we can just do router here. And then we go with our first post route. So remember, we will be using this inside URL. So the slash means the URL, and then we will have async. Request will be type request, response will be type response, and then we do something here. And now at this point, this is a place where you may want to have middleware to validate things, so that you are exactly getting things that you are expecting and nothing else. For example, in case of user email, you are getting email in the email valid format. If it is something we are expecting in number, then it should be number, and so on, you know, so that we are not getting anything else. That's up to you. I'm not going to deal with validation in this entire project. Maybe just a basic way of checking it, but not exactly validating it. But that's very important, and you know how to do it. Also, there is another approach, and I've seen it in multiple places. So instead of doing everything here now inside router, just like services, we can also have something called controller. And the idea would be that inside services, we will only do thing that is related to calling and deleting everything with our databases. However, for example, we had this URL code, and there can be many other logic that we want to make sure everything is handled before we are calling this function. So in that case, there is a practice of using controller. For this small project, I'm not going to do it, but you can do it. And in that case, you will have a separate thing called controller, and then instead of calling all this, you will just say route. For example, create URL controller, and that will be somewhere in controller folder, and that will already get all the request, response, everything, and you do everything, even validation and so on. However, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do everything here in the route. Okay. All right. So the next thing we want to do is, if you go here and if you see in the flow, so we will get original URL, and if the URL exists. So we have that case to handle, and for that I can write here to do. You can move this to a separate controller. Okay, so but we are not going to do it. So we will get something from, not from request.body. I told you this request has body, it has params, it has methods, and so on. Okay, so that's a request type. And then we are getting something from body, and that body will be what, for example, for the post request. So let's go here, and then for the post request we can use body here, and we can say from data. Actually, we can go and do JSON here. So we can pass something from here, and that will be caught in this body. So we will be at least expecting original link. I'm just making sure that we don't have mismatch with things. So in the type we have original link, and then in the model we have original link. Okay, that's good. So we have original link, and if we have original link, we can try to do something. So if we have original link, we'll do something else we will do something. Okay, so that's the case. So if there is nothing, we can even show them like a bad request, or yeah, so that they are not sending us things that we need. So because we are at least expecting original link. Okay, and then the next one is, if we have original link, then still there are few questions. So first I'm going to add try and catch. Okay, since this is async, we want to catch things and so on. So first thing is, we want to see if we have URL, or actually if URL exists already, or data exists. We can even call it data, up to us, but just for the sake I will call URL or URL data. So let's just sort. So let's try to find, because we have already this model, and then we can just say find one, and then here we can pass original link. So you see, this is what I was telling you, that we can already directly use this, so we don't need this kind of services. However, there are all these extra things we might want to do, and services are helpful. Okay, so the idea is we want to make sure that this original link does not exist already. If it exists, so if we have URL data, okay, there are a lot of if and else. Of course, you can have some other way to deal with, but I don't mind having this if and else. At least in this case, having this kind of like guard ways, first checking if it doesn't exist and throwing. I don't like that approach in many cases, because this kind of code are easier to read, at least when you don't have so many nested. In this case, we have one if, another if, maybe we'll have one more, and that's it. Okay, so URL data. So if we have that, all we want to do is, okay, so this is up to us, but if the data exists, we may not want to redirect those people directly to that, but we just want to tell them that something exists, and that will be useful later in our application. So when someone tries to enter this new URL and edit, then we can say that this already exists, so we can show it in UI. So we are not using this to redirect, but just to tell them that you already have this link. Okay, so for that we can just use JSON, and then we can just pass URL data. Okay, so that's the case if it exists. If it does not, and then we go to this our flow. So if it does not exist, then we are going with this. So in that case, we can still use the same variable, and then we can just say await, and we can use this create URL, and then we can pass request.body. Or we can even just have const data. So now if we have data, we will call 201 that's created, and then we will pass the data. If not, so we still have catch here, and we want to see what is the error. And then if you have some logger, you can use that logger instead to log it. And then we have status. For now, let's just give this, because most probably it's not user's fault, of course. And we can say, all right, so now you saw that we have actually created a post route. We still have one more thing to do, because we have this route, but we need to add this in our index route here. And that's what I was telling you. So we can call URL router. So let's go here, import URL router from URL router, and then you can use this here. Okay, it seems like we haven't exported anything like earlier. Okay, this is wrong. All right, so anything related to URL, we will do all the post, get, update, anything we want, we will do inside this. And this route, as I said, this you could directly use this here. So instead of API and base router, you can have, we can do something like app.use, and then we have API, and then we can do URL, and then we can have URL router here, and that also works. But as I said, we don't want to import so many things in application, but we want to do that in individual file here in router, and that's why I'm using this index in many places. As you see, I use that also in type here. I did that. We could actually also do it in services. We can have index here, and then all this file we can actually import there and then export from there. So we could use it like that, but I think this is okay for services. So if we go to Postman, let's try to create a post request and let's see what we get. Okay, so we don't get anything. It says 404 not found. Okay, I think the reason here is I should not do get there, I should do use there, because we do the get and everything inside here. Okay, so now let's go here. Okay, so it says missing required parameters, and that's true because we are not passing anything in original link. So let's go, and here we can open something like this, original link, and then this will be, let's just write google.com test. So okay, it still says missing required parameters, and let's see why. Okay, so if we go to URL services, I think it's coming from here, or it's coming from here. Okay, so at least okay, so let's have a debugger here. I don't know if our debugger is actually working. Seems like it's not working properly if we don't have original link. So let's see if we have typo, and we do have typo. Okay, so internal server error, and that means we are getting here somewhere. Okay, so it means something is happening. So all right, so I had to debug a bit, and all I missed was await here, and because of that it was going here, obviously, because without await these are async action, because it's calling db and so on, so it might take some time, and that's why we were not having any result. However, now I call it and we have something. So you can see we have id that usually we get from Mongodb itself, and then we have URL code. This is exactly what we wanted, and then we have original link, and then we have visit count, which is 0 by default, and so on. All right. So if I do the same, I should be still getting exactly the same one, because that's what, and it seems like no. Okay, so we might have some issue here, because if we pass the same original link, we should be getting the same URL. So seems like we have some issue here. So we will try to get URL data by passing that, and if we have data, then we are sending the response of that data. If not, we'll create URL and then we are passing that data. So here we have 200. Okay, so that means we are actually getting back the same data, otherwise it should create. So just remember, we have GKL at the last and we still have GKL as the last. Yeah, that's true. So this is, and then the ID is 799 at the end and ID is 799 at the end. So this is working as we want it. Okay, and there is a small thing that I want. This ID I don't want with underscore, and then I don't want this versioning. So there's a way to remove that, and for that we need to go here in the model, and I just have something that you can copy paste. So you can get it in the docs, or you can even Google it, how to remove the versioning and so on. And for that there is this thing, I just basically copy pasted. So your schema this, so virtual's true, version key we will remove it, and then we will transform and we will take this reference ID. So now if I save this, I go here, if I do this, you see we have all the thing we want. Obviously it's not increasing visit count, and that is because we are not increasing the visit count for already exist one. We are only increasing when someone enters and we redirect them. Okay, so that's the reason, and it's done according to how we want it. All right, I think one more thing we might want, or probably we can even add that from the front end, because if we have this, when we are showing it in the front end in this kind of table here, so we can add this UI URL there itself in the front end, so we don't need to do anything here. However, let's go and let's handle the get route. Okay, get, so the reason is get URL by URL code. We can even have it with ID, but we don't deal with ID here, we deal mainly with, so we just want URL code, and that is string. And then what we want, usually in TypeScript, it's also good practice that you write here what you are returning, and I'm not doing it now, but it's a good practice to do that. So we have a string, and then we will add try catch here. So, and then we are not going to test this URL code because it's a mandatory and we need it. So what we can do is we can have data, and we already have a bad practice. Somewhere we are calling it URL, somewhere we are calling it data, but it really doesn't matter. So we want data, and then the data is await, and then URL dot find one. We cannot use find by ID because we are using it with URL code here. So if we have data, if we don't have data, then we can throw error. We can say bad request, or we can even say not found, but I think this is okay because we will already do it in route here, that if it does not exist or something. Okay, so we'll just send a bad request here. Actually would be good to send 404. For now I'm just gonna do this, and then if we have data, so if we go after this, that means we have data, then we want to do two things. First is data dot visit count is data dot visit count plus 1. That is what we want. And then we actually also want to save data, we can actually we have to save this, we have to update this. So post data dot update data. I don't know if this will exactly work, we'll see. And the reason I'm not adding await async is we don't need to wait that, okay, but that make, because we want to return the data as soon as possible to the user. However, we want to catch something, and that is we want to also console log error here, and then we just want error. Okay, so let's see if this works. If not, we'll modify it. So we'll go here, then here router.get, and then we want URL code, and then here we are using this service, so that is get URL by URL code, get URL by URL code. Okay, so okay, I think that's not going to work, and that should not work, because that's our controller way. So here I'm going to copy this one, and then I'm going to paste this, and then close this. So what we want is we want URL code, and that comes from request.params.url code, because we are getting this here. And same thing also in front end, when you have a router or something set up, we always define this, and whatever we define this, we can get that as a splitted from params, and then that will be URL code. You can just even say code, whatever. In some case we might need ID, in that case we can get that ID. So this is URL code, and then so the URL code. So if we don't have URL code, we actually already want to response the status, and here we want to say bad request, because we want that there needs to be something after slash. Okay, so the next one is, if we have a URL code, what we want to do is, now we want to have try catch, and then here we want to have const, actually, yeah, so we want data here, and data will be await, and then get. Okay, and if we have data, we want to do status 301, that is redirection, and then link. So that's what we can do, and we are getting some issue here. Okay, and I was kind of expecting that, and I think it does have original link. Okay, is it so? Oh no, I think its problem is here. So after 301 we have to say redirect and then pass that. So I think we have good. So the idea how this should work is like in our flow chart here. So someone is now entering the short URL. Okay, so the short URL will be our domain name slash this URL code, and then it will search in the DB. If it does not exist, it will return 404. In our case, we are returning something else. We have to handle that. We can handle that. But if it exists, it will count +1, and then it will redirect here. Actually, this count +1, I can even write somewhere here because it doesn't apply here. But anyway, you got the idea. So let's go here. Then let's try here. So first thing first, I'm gonna make still this request. Okay, so we have this URL. So this one, I will go to the get one, and then we still need that, and then I will paste this. So if everything goes good, I think we should do it from somewhere else than Postman here, because every request we do in URL in browser is actually everything we do here in browser is a GET request. So if I send this, it should actually take us to the original link, and you see it does. So it redirected us to the original link. Let's see what happens if we do this here. Okay, so we actually got 404 not found. And why is that? So it says us 404 not found, maybe because it doesn't let us redirect from here. However, from here it does. So let's try one more URL. So let's say we have now a new URL, and that is facebook.com. So now this thing should change because we will have a different ID, and it did. So now I can copy this, and then I go here, and this is what I was talking about, base URL, because in reality you will have your domain name, something like, let's say, bikas.com, and then slash, and then this code, and then when they enter it, it will take them to the original URL. So this is what I actually want to sort something that has pretty long URL. Okay, so this has pretty long URL, and we might not remember this, or our user, or if you are sending someone text message or something, they might not remember this, or if you are sharing in Twitter, Facebook, they might not remember this. So let's convert this URL. This is actually also a way to check it if it supports this sort of long URL. Okay, now let's send it. Okay, so we have original URL, and then we have sort. So we got our sort from here. Then I will just go to localhost, and then this last one I will paste here. If I go, you see it will redirect us to this one. So this way our first part of this project is done. So in the first part we connected DB, we made a couple of actually one model, we made one services, and then we have one router. At least the main concept of our application, which is that you provide original link, it will give you the shortcode, or actually full URL when we attach it to UI, and then with that you can actually call that short URL, and then it will redirect you to your original long URL. Okay, so that is our minimal version, and we did that. So in our next video you will get all the playlist and everything in the description and so on of each other. So wherever you are watching, you will be getting a link for other videos related to it. So the next one we will go and we'll try to attach this to this kind of approach. We'll probably not have profile yet because we still don't want to introduce user, but we'll just want to have the UI version from where you can create a new URL, and then you will get a short URL, you can copy it and so on. And then you will realize that with that approach you can always only create one time URL, and that's it, and then you cannot edit it, you cannot do it, so on, and then that's what we will handle with a profile and so on. So that's all for today's video. I hope this was useful for you, and if you agreed, please smash the like button. For upcoming videos on this series, please remember to subscribe my channel and also press the bell notification icon so that you will be notified whenever I upload new videos. Thank you so much for being here until this point with this video, and I hope to see you in other video series as well. Until then, keep coding. Bye bye.